Hello and welcome to the Lander Recon Recap. I'm Shelley Carney.
And I'm Toby Eunice. Stick with us for a few seconds and we'll answer your questions about our Lander Recon.
So recently we went to Lander, Wyoming and the Sinks Canyon State Park.
To look for Fenn's treasure.
Right.
And then what we did is we opened it up to our viewers and asked you to ask questions in your comments, and that we would take the questions that were the most highly ranked and answer some of those questions for you about our trip. So here we go.
Question number 1 from The Resistance, and this got 8 thumbs up as well. What made you decide to search in the Lander, Wyoming area?
Is that my answer? Are you looking at me like that's my answer?
Well, you kind of are the one who puts things together and instigates the trip, yes.
Right. Well, it started, the vision for this recon started with the story of Fenn flying to Lander and visiting the Little Poposia River. That was my first hint, and then I started tracking things down. I was able to associate it first with the Warm Waters halt at the Western Interior Sea. Sinks Canyon is the canyon down because it's a metaphor. Sinks, get it? And we were looking for the Homa Brown, which was, we believed, the lignites, the coal deposits that were there based on our Homa Brown video that's up and has a whole bunch of hits. People are liking it. So it was my plan to go to Lander, Wyoming and spend our time reconnoitering Sinks Canyon, and that's what we did. We thought it was a good opportunity.
There was also that we talked about in another video about the 7 people. What they had in common was that they all crossed the Poposia River. Right,
and that all goes back to when and where. That was in the video where we talked about when and where Fenn actually hid the treasure.
Right.
And the basis for the theory that was stated in that video was the visit to the Little Poposia.
Right.
Or Popo-Aggie.
When and where Fenn hid the treasure, I think it was?
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
The unintended clue.
So we hope that answers your question. If not, leave another comment below.
Or go back and read those, watch those videos.
Watch those videos, yeah, because that pretty much explains it.
Yeah. Okay. Are you going to read that one?
Yeah, that's from Adam Foddy, who regularly comments on our videos. Usually says he likes them.
And got 4 thumbs up.
And got 4 thumbs up. Has your trip strengthened or weakened your resolve that the treasure is indeed hidden at that location?
Well, there were times during the trip that I was wondering why we were there, but then there were other times where we had so many clues and so much history that seemed to fit, and it was just like we have all of this peripheral stuff. If it would just gel into a aha answer for us, then we would be able to go right to that treasure.
I think that's it. We went there having a good sense of why we were going there, that there was a possibility that we could make the clues fit. Once we got there, and in addition to traveling in the area, actually exploring the area, and doing some research at the various museums and other locations, there was just so many coincidences that were really hard to explain, and I think it reinforced the possibility that the treasure was located nearby, maybe in Sinks Canyon, but that we had to do a little bit more research. We need to do a better job, not of just reconning, but of targeting. So let me go back to the question. What was the question?
Did it strengthen our resolve?
I believe it strengthened our resolve. Would you agree?
I think the extra clues that we found while we were there, the history of the place, that Lander was originally Fort Brown, all of the things that seemed to just start to fit in, and the answers that would pop up as we were doing research, it seemed to all go together. So that did strengthen it in that way.
So before we got there, we knew that there was a Fort Brown connection. But while we were there, we discovered this gentleman whose name was Nolan Brown, who did a lot of surveying in the area. Pardon me?
Newton.
I'm sorry, Newton Brown, who did a lot of surveying in the area. And then we discovered that there was a relationship between Newton Brown and the sinks. That at one time there was a dam built up there to produce electricity, and that the dam was engineered by Newton Brown. So you look at these little things, and suddenly they go beyond the realm of coincidence, and what you're trying to do is see if somehow that fits into everything while not chasing down another rabbit hole. But I would say on the whole, we felt like it was a good recon, and that if anything, it leads us to additional research and probably a return to the area. Would you say?
And you thought it looked funny.
It did look funny. There were areas on the south face of the canyon that you'd go up, and you'd see the north face on the far side with all that geological and Native American influence. Then you'd be on the south side in the middle of a pine forest with these beautiful meadows and its purple and yellow flowers and the sound of the paposia down below and the wind whistling through the pines. And you're going like, yeah, I could see, and lots of logs to kick over. And I would say to myself, yeah, I could see him wanting to be buried here. So it has a lot going for it.
It does. Question number 3 from Muerto de Corrales, +3.
Which is up in an area you live, right? Corrales is right below you, assuming it's Corrales, New Mexico. There is a Corrales, Mexico.
Oh, yeah. So what did you find at the Lander Airport? Well, we found a very small FBO.
You mean beside this red fire hydrant?
Oh, yeah, we found that too. And this sign that says Hunt Field. Anyway, we found a very small FBO where private pilots could land their small aircraft and not much else.
That's about it. It's definitely not a commercial-sized airport. And I think, and we'll explain this later in the questioning, but the conclusion we came to, because we couldn't find one, is there's no Avis rental car location in that airport, nor could there ever have been. It simply isn't big enough. The airport...
There's no tower.
There's no tower.
There's
a small
commercial
building where a private pilot could pick up his weather reports before he left, the METARs, but there is no big airport with Avis and other rental car counters. No. And then Shelley brought up a good point while we were there, and that is Avis wouldn't hire a 14-year-old boy to run the counter because they couldn't do anything. They can't drive the cars, et cetera, et cetera. So it is possible that back in that time when general aviation was more popular, if you flew into an FBO, they would have what was referred to as a courtesy car. So it may be possible that Fenn may have used a courtesy car to make his trip out to the Little Paposia, but it wasn't an Avis rental. So, and we'll tell you more about that at the end of our presentation. Frank Rizzo, my friend Frank, what was your blaze?
Blaze. Oh, well, Frank, if we told you that, we might as well just tell you exactly where to find the treasure.
So here's what I can tell you, Frank, and others. We are looking for a blaze. We believe the blaze has both a Native American and a geologic component. That puts it immediately into the category of petroglyphs or pictographs. And we believe that our blaze is a petroglyph with 2 symbols that represent a burial location. So that's all we're going to give you.
That's what we're looking for. We didn't
find it,
see it, no.
But that's what we're looking for. That's right. Mm-hmm. So next question.
Okay, from TR7100 with a one thumbs up. Along the lines of the question from the Resistance, the first one we asked, in the 5-day recon, what areas near Lander did you search, and did you have enough time to search all of your potential solves? So we searched quite a bit. We also researched quite a bit. I'm going to let Toby tell you about where we went, and I believe we looked at everything we wanted to look at when we went up there, knowing where we wanted to look. We saw everything we wanted to look at. We may go back and look some more.
So the only thing I changed is that it is very likely we will go back and look some more. It's not just maybe.
Oh, okay.
So we searched primarily Sinks Canyon from its beginning to the point at which you take Lewis Lake Road. You make the turn, you go up the mountain, which we did make for different reasons. you go up the mountain towards Lewis Lake Road. But our primary search area was Sinks Canyon, from what they refer to as the Sawmill Campground to the Bruce's Campground. The south side of the canyon is very green. The north side of the canyon is very brown. The Sinks is somewhere around this area. It has some great campsites, by the way. We searched all the places that we could and that we wanted to when we made the Recon plan. When we got there, we realized, as usual, there's more to be searched up there. We think it has a lot of potential. We didn't go, in terms of search algorithms, we didn't go beyond the turnout to Lewis Lake Road. Now, we did drive up Lewis Lake Road because we were going to go to visit the Little
Poposia?
The intersection of Lewis Lake Road and the Little Poposia River. But at that point, we realized that the water in all these rivers was way too high to be useful to us. So we turned back. We did go up on Friday, and I did some trout fishing in Worthen Lake. So we went up that road, but that was not for the purposes of search. So I would say, bottom line is, we searched what effectively is Sinks Canyon State Park up to the point at which it becomes part of the National Forest, and then stopped at the turn up into Lewis Lake Road.
Most of our searching was done near the Poposia Campground, where you cross the suspension bridge and you go on that 1 mile hike around the different habitats. We felt really strongly about that area. Didn't find a blaze
No.
that we were looking for.
I think we would have had to go closer to the mountains, and you're at the point there, go closer to what effectively is the south face, which tends to be flat at that point. It's used for rock climbing at that point, and I think we needed to spend more time there. That's where we'll go back to.
And we did meet some Native American young men who were gathering sage for a ceremony.
Right.
And we felt that felt very Fenny to me.
Yeah.
Like that 14-year-old young man he talked about could very well have been a young Native American man out searching for sage for one of their ceremonies.
Yeah, it was very good. What did you learn from this recon?
So many things. We made a list. Look what we learned.
All right,
We talked about number one quite a lot on this trip.
So here's the conclusion we came to, and we think it's a valid conclusion. Not that we didn't kind of know this before, but I think what we absolutely learned is that Fenn's stories are compilations of memories from a variety of times and sources. And that's when we realized there is no Avis rental car place here. There's no 14-year-old that would have been there renting cars. There never has been. There never will be. We realized, you know what, for as well told as that story is, not only in Moby Dickens, but in Too Far to Walk, it's a compilation of memories. There may have been, as Shelley said, he might have been in that canyon. He might have, like we did, run into a 14-year-old Native American male who was collecting sage for an upcoming ceremony on the Shoshone reservation nearby, the Wind River Reservation. So it's a compilation, and so we came back and looked at all the stories that we use as a basis for this, and what you have to do is you're not judging whether it's true or false. You're judging how the story is compiled and what parts of the story are relevant to your next recon. And I think that was the most important thing that we discovered when we went for this search. And I'm not calling Fenn a liar. I'm just saying that when he put that story together, he did what I would do as a storyteller and what I have done as a storyteller. My stories are compilations of memories that have somehow intermingled. They all fit together well, but it's a compilation as opposed to a straight line story where everything is related and really part of the story.
And that's what you do when you write a script. You do the same thing. You're not going to tell the story of how you sat around all day watching television and then the next day you did something and the next day you didn't. You're going to put all the good stuff in one day and talk about that as one story instead.
I mean, I spent 2 years in Vietnam, and I can reduce those 2 years down to about 5 different stories, basically. So,
and the rest of it is just sitting in the jungle being hot
getting
and
sweaty.
Getting eaten by mosquitoes.
Not trying to smell like cigarettes. So the other thing that we found out is Popo Aggie is not pronounced Popo Aggie. It's pronounced Popoja. And if you say Popo Aggie, people don't have any problem correcting you.
And you can tell that they've heard it a lot, because when we visited the woman at the BLM,
the map place,
the BLM office, she didn't even wait for us to say it wrong. She just said, right out said, that is Popoja River.
Right.
That's how you say it.
One of the stops we made was the BLM office to pick up some of their maps because
Toby loves maps. He has an addiction to maps.
Go ahead with this one, because I think
number
this was
3, of course, Native Americans gather ceremonial sage in Sinks Canyon. We saw several days in a row, we saw young men carrying bushels of sage, and we didn't know what they were doing, and so we stopped and talked to some of them about it.
And it was kind of curious because we always assumed you're not supposed to take anything out of these state parks or federal parks. And I thought, what's the big deal? How come they get away? They're Native Americans, and they have the right to do that as they gather the sage and other flora. For their various ceremonies.
And they were very forthcoming about exactly why they were doing it, what was coming up for them. And they were glad to tell us about it. No one we spoke to knew about the treasure. One day, it was the first day, we went to the museum and we spoke to the person behind the counter, and she'd never heard of it. She was excited about it. She looked it up on her computer right away. While we were talking to her about the story, a family came in and they heard their name, the Brown family. And so they came over and said, what are we talking about? We'd like to hear this story. So Toby had an impromptu lecture series that day at the Pioneer Museum.
And it wasn't my last.
No, it wasn't.
I got to lecture a lot about the treasure.
Every store we went to, we talked about where we were going and why we were going there, and everybody's like, what is that? And then they would look it up right away. They'd get excited about it, but they just hadn't heard about it at all.
So we found out that Newton Brown, a lander icon from the late 1800s, early 1900s, a surveyor and engineer, writes a lot like Fenn. I picked up a story that he wrote. We picked it up in the museum, and I'm actually going to send it to Forrest because he tells stories.
Can you print it, or is it?
I did print it.
Oh, okay.
I have to copy it.
Can you put it on the blog, or is it copywritten?
It is not copywritten. I could put it on the blog. That's a good idea. I think we'll do that. I'll make a scan. I'll scan it and put it on the
PDF.
blog. Yeah, it's kind of neat.
Well, it was interesting because it was from the 30s, right?
Yeah, it was around the 30s, and he was writing some of his memories. But again, you point out, you find out doing this research, that Newton Brown was the engineer that designed the dam that produced electricity in Sinks Canyon between the Sinks and the Rise. And we're going how is that not somehow connected?
Oh, let's see, number 6. Fenny places in Wyoming are very different from Fenny places in New Mexico. Why?
I just think it's the combination of the altitude and the latitude. It's just a different ecological, environmental place. We tend to be dry and short shrubs. Even our pine trees aren't that tall. Up there, it feels more like a Fenn Yellowstone kind of forest, although it's not Yellowstone.
I think it's a little more ancient, isn't it?
It is in that particular area is because it dates back, that 100 million years that we talked about in one of our previous.
Whereas we were under the ocean.
Yeah, exactly.
The sea.
Yeah. We were drowning in.
Well, we wouldn't be here, would we? And Toby learned what a cheese wheel is.
I did. A cheese wheel is a quarter-pound hamburger patty covered with cheese, dipped in batter, and deep fried. Now, the mistake I made is I didn't get the accoutrement. I had to eat it plain. But it has a lot of potential. I'm not sure I would eat them on a regular basis any more than I would eat a McDonald's Quarter Pounder on a regular basis. Not that I need any of that.
Would you eat them in the rain? Would you eat them on a train?
But what was funny about it, the reason this issue came up, was every day on our drive we were staying at the Shoshone Rose Hotel, and every day on our drive from the Shoshone Rose Hotel to either 9th Street or 5th Street to get up into Sinks Canyon, we passed by Dairyland. And at the bottom of the Big Dairyland sign, it said,
"We have cheese wheels."
Yeah, we have cheese wheels.
And every time we go by there, cheese wheels.
Kevin and Shelley would not quite shout, but...
Oh, and you never did.
No.
Mm-hmm.
So it became a thing. And so we decided, well, let's at least stop and get one and ask one. And I think we made a little video. You guys can see
it's on our YouTube
eating
channel.
of the cheese wheel video.
It's on Instagram, too.
We discovered, so on day 5, I promised myself I wanted to get some fishing in to say that I had actually caught some fish, some trout in Wyoming, and I had my equipment with me, and we decided the best place to try it was above the Worthen Lake.
Yeah.
And what was the name of that stream that went into it? It's not Firehole. That's Yellowstone.
It started with an E.
It did?
Didn't it?
I thought it started with an F. Anyway, there's a river that feeds into Worthen Lake. And I know from experience that a good place to fish is where a river enters a lake. And so we went out there and found a nice place. Meantime, the rains were moving in, and I knew I was going to get a very short period of time. So we headed down, found the point at which the river entered, and the trout were literally jumping. If I had put a net out, they would have jumped in my net. And at that point, the mosquitoes decided to attack us. And there wasn't enough mosquito spray to prevent them not only from getting to you. I mean, Shelley had like 10 bites before we got the spray on. She put the spray on, and they were still biting her through her shirt and her blouse and her pants and all kinds of things. So we convinced her to go back to the car and just wait long enough for me to catch one fish.
Convinced me? No, I ran screaming back to the car. That was me.
So, and I took the time to catch one beautiful little grayling trout, put him back in, remove the hook, put him back in, and then Kevin and I packed up and headed back up for the car. And the rains started coming just as we were leaving the area. So yeah, mosquitoes love Shelley.
They always have.
Yeah.
That wasn't news to me.
Okay.
Question number 7.
From Dale Garlic.
Were you able to search along Sawmill Creek at all? No, we went to Sawmill Creek Campground, and we had lunch there a couple of times. It's a beautiful spot right by the river, and just really, really nice little playground for the kids with a mastodon they can climb on.
It's a mastodon or buffalo?
It was a mastodon, a small mastodon, very small one for little kids to climb on, and a nice little campground there.
So there's a couple of things with Sawmill Creek. Number one, what's even more interesting than Sawmill Creek is the area across from Sawmill Creek on the mountain there. There is a rock outcrop that even if you didn't have an imagination, looks like a mountain lion, literally. And then there's a little trail that goes up there, and there's little nooks all along the trails where if you wanted to hide something, you could find a place to hide it. We didn't have time to explore it. It was not only a hike, it involved a climb, and we didn't have the equipment to do that. And I don't mean it was a serious, Forrest Fenn could have walked up there. But what was for us, the reason we didn't get to Sawmill Creek, it does look damned interesting because basically it's a second canyon that's south of Sinks Canyon. Here's the problem. The problem is that if you come from the Sawmill Creek campground, or the Mastodon campground as we called it, you have to come around this direction. There's two problems with that. Number one, the Paposia was running so high and fast, you would have put yourself at risk if you had tried to cross it. You could not have crossed it. You would have been washed away unless you had literally a rope, and then you're playing the same game that we read about in the newspapers. The second thing is that if you try to approach it from this side, you're going to have to get onto private property. And you have to get it's private property. We have the BLM map. It's private property for a pretty good distance up there, and then it becomes part of the state park, and it becomes part of the state, part of BLM land. But you're going to have to go on private property, and a lot of that property, you could tell the property owners had gone out of their way to fence, probably for that reason. The only other way to get to it is from the south, and the way that you do that is you take the loop road up, and there's a couple of fire roads that get you in that direction. The first 500 feet of those fire roads are passable, and then it becomes serious four-wheel drive, and then they become ATV. So he would have had to park someplace up off the loop road and then make 2 trips back here, and those are not mile or 2 mile trips. Those are 5 to 7 mile trips at that point. So he would have had to make 4 of those on eight, and he would have had to have an ATV with him. So
in which case he wouldn't have needed to make 4 trips because he could carry it on the ATV. He would take it all.
Exactly.
Didn't make sense.
It just had too many obstacles for us to do a search in the area without walking our private property or without having an ATV with us.
Right.
So that kind of ruled it out at that point.
Yeah. So, how does the home of Brown fit with Lander? Home of Brown. Well, if you watch our YouTube video about the home of Brown, where's the home of Brown? The home of Brown Revealed, it's called, right? Mm-hmm. We talk about lignites. And here you can see in the wall of the canyon face, lignite deposit.
That's what we were looking for until we discovered Newton Brown, because that added another. Not that it changed my mind, but when we went up there, what we were looking for were the lignite deposits, because as we talk about in our video called "The Home of Brown Revealed," the brown paint is made with lignite, and we found those deposits. They are pretty well spaced out, but they are there. This particular one was literally right across the, not the river, but the overflow. The overflow just east of the ranger station. But we saw a lot of them. So we're very comfortable that that fits into the poem.
But for those of you who like the fish analogy of the brown trout, there is, at the rise, there are a large group of brown trout that hang out there because, trout like to go upstream to spawn. And in this particular river, they can only go as far as the rise, and then the river disappears under the ground and into the wall, and the fish are like, okay, I guess we're going to just hang out here. People feed them. There's food you can purchase to throw to the
fish food
brown trout there. So that also could be the home of brown if you are inclined to think that brown trout is the home of brown.
Right. It fits with that. It's interesting because they were pretty fat little trout. Even the smaller ones were, you could tell, were well fed. They're sitting there, and they sit in a particular place on the rise because you can tell there's food coming from where the water enters the rise, and they feed on that. But in addition to that, they have these fish feeding machines that you can toss over, and they respond to that. You can look down at them. There's a what would you call that? Deck?
An overlook.
An overlook that you can step over and you can actually look down. We've got a couple of pictures of them. And it is illegal to fish on that side of the road. That's how they define it. And the rise is on the north side of the road, and you can't fish. So not that I'm sure it hasn't totally prevented people from attempting it, but
as some people have pointed out, if you do consider that the home of brown, there's an issue because below that, or just east of that, is all for maintenance people only. So there's no parking. You can walk down there, but it's kind of crowded with maintenance workers and that sort of thing. So it wouldn't really be a great place to hide a treasure because maintenance workers could easily come across it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's our home of brown story, and we're sticking to it. Mm-hmm. So wrap up.
We believe Lander is a credible solution. Everything that we saw there continue to solidify
To reinforce, yeah.
and reinforce our theories, along with all of the history that we brought in with it, Fort Brown and Newton Brown and Frederick Brown and all of the Browns.
Plenty of Brown to go around,
Even
yeah.
the Brown family we met at the museum. So we like it as a solution. We're just having to keep working it.
So in the canyon, the south face is a lot more fenny, ecologically speaking, than the north face. But the north face is important because it provides you both the geological and the Native American influences in your as you stand there on the south face. So it's important to have both components. But if he was going to hide it, I believe it would be on the south face rather than the north.
Mm-hmm. The area around the intersection of the Loop Road and the Little Poposia River deserves some attention, but we haven't fit the clues to it. So tell us about that.
So in Fenn's story, he says he landed in Lander to visit. How could you not want to see the Little Poposia River? We spend in Sinks Canyon, it's the Middle Poposia, and there's another one that goes through the reservation that we crossed every day on the way to the hotel several times called the North Poposia. When Fenn tells his story, he tells the story of wanting to visit. How could you not want to visit the Little Poposia River? Now
that runs through Lander, but that
right.
one doesn't run through Lander.
Right, and here's the conflict. The Little Poposia does not run through Lander. It runs south of Lander through mostly private property. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I know from the time that I've spent with Fenn and analyzing his videos, he uses the word little as a euphemism for precious, loving, lovable. And so I think...
Cute.
Yeah, cute. and if you look at the place where the Little Poposia intersects the Loop Road on a map, it's actually very attractive. The problem again was that the rivers were so high that people were saying you're not going to be able to get back there anyway. And they were. One of the gentlemen in the fly fishing store told us that the snowmelt had been 480% of normal. Mm-hmm. So it was still going, there was no fishing to be done. That's why we had to go all the way up to Wortham Lake. So there's an area where Loop Road and the Little Poposia intersect that's worth some investigation, but I think you're in pretty solid Recon territory if you're in Sinks Canyon, because no one we met referred to that river as the Middle Poposia. They referred to it as the Poposia River. So I think that was but it's worth just kind of visiting it, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you say new research indicates it's worth going back for another look. You have some new research since we got back?
It was pretty much the research that we collected when we were there. Mm-hmm. The museum there, the Museum of the American West, has two file cabinets full of folders that are sorted. So if you look for Brown, you're going to find folders labeled Brown for different reasons, and then you can look through that. So there was some additional research that we discovered while we were there that kind of the whole story of the Sinks Canyon and the rise and the power generating plant, all of that is something, but I didn't focus on that before we got there. So I feel like that was stuff that we looked at once we got there, and I'm still in the process of curating that and doing some additional analysis on it. So I promised these guys that we A, will go back, and B, will go back with a much more solid solution.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So if you would like to see all of the photos that we took during our trip to Lander, go to gypsieskiss.com at the blog there. We have all of our photos. We have some also on Facebook. If you go to our Facebook page, AGK Anything else?
If you go to A Gypsy's Kiss, the blog, if you look down the right navigation bar, you'll see main headers for all our videos, and then a second header for all our photo albums. And they're listed alphabetically, so all the ones from Lander are Lander Recon Day 1, Lander Recon Day 2, et cetera, et cetera. And we put a lot of photos up there. And we're really good about making photos of signage. So, you know, when you've not been there and you want to read these signs, we try to make those, you're free to download them and read them, use them what you want. And if you decide to use them for whatever reason on your blog or website, all we ask is that you give us credit.
Okay.
All right.
What are we going to do for our next recon?
So our next recon is connected to next week's vlog.
Oh.
Now, we told people that we were going to talk about No Place for the Meek. Mm-hmm. So our next recon is in Montana, because I think Montana is the place that's no place for the meek.
And we have to do that before the snows come.
Yeah, we're going to try and do it in September. We could probably still do it in October, but you're putting yourself at risk, and that just depends on the weather. Mm-hmm. By November, you're not going to get into these places anyway, so
right.
Not safely.
Okay, well, and that is our Lander Recon recap. Thank you so much for watching today and for your questions.
Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it if you'd like this video and subscribe to our channel. We try to produce quality content, and so if you want to keep up with what we're doing, not only here on YouTube, but on our blog, please subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching today. We look forward to seeing you in our next video. Take care.
Bye-bye.